You bought me, now do it. The rancher did it, and then he had a wife. She had never planned to leave her city, let alone her life. Things fell apart slowly at first, then all at once. Bills piled up on the small table in her rented room. Each paper carried red marks and final warnings. Her father's medical costs had eaten whatever savings she once had. When he passed away, the debts did not disappear with him. They stayed behind, heavy and silent, waiting for her to fail. She tried everything she could think of. She worked long hours at a factory where the machines were louder than her thoughts. She cleaned houses on weekends, sometimes for people who would not even look at her face. At night, she lay awake, counting numbers in her head, hoping they would somehow change by morning. They never did. The landlord gave her one last week. The loan company stopped answering her calls and sent messages instead. Friends slowly stopped picking up the phone. Everyone had their own problems, and hers had become too big to share. That was when she saw the message. It was not dramatic. It did not promise luxury or happiness. It was short, almost cold. A man was looking for someone to work on a ranch far away. Food and shelter would be provided. The pay was enough to clear debts. No experience needed. The message ended with a single line that made her pause. Long-term commitment required. Something about it felt wrong, but desperation has a way of making danger look like hope, she replied. The man answered quickly. His words were polite but firm. He asked very little about her past and nothing about her dreams. He only wanted to know if she could work hard and follow rules. When she asked about the location, he said it was remote, quiet, and far from the noise of the city. When she asked about a contract, he said everything would be explained in person. A part of her wanted to stop right there. Another part reminded her that she had no other path left. 2 days later, she boarded a bus with a single bag and a heart full of fear. The journey was long. The city slowly faded into open roads, dry land, and wide skies. Phone signals disappeared. When she finally stepped off the bus, the air felt heavier, like it was pressing down on her shoulders. A truck waited nearby. The man from the messages stood beside it. He was older than she expected, tall, broad, and quiet. His face showed little emotion, but his eyes studied everything. He did not smile. He did not ask how the trip was. He only nodded and took her bag, placing it in the back of the truck. They drove in silence. The road turned to dirt, then to dust. Fences stretched endlessly on both sides. Animals moved in the distance, slow and calm, as if they belonged to another world. After a long time, the ranch appeared. It was large, isolated, and surrounded by land that seemed to have no end. This was when unease settled deep in her chest. The ranch house was old but strong, built to last. There were barns, sheds, and open fields. No neighbors, no nearby town, just land, sky, and silence. The man finally spoke. "This is where you'll stay." She nodded, unsure what to say. Inside the house, everything was clean but plain. No personal items, no warmth. It felt more like a place meant for work than for living. He sat across from her at a wooden table and placed a folder between them. "You owe a lot of money," he said, not asking, only stating a fact. "How do you know that? I check before I make deals." The word deal echoed in her mind. He explained calmly. He had paid off her debts. Every one of them. The landlord, the loans, the hospital bills. She felt dizzy listening to the numbers. It was more money than she had ever held in her life. "There's no free work," he continued. "You work here, you stay here, until what I paid is earned back." Her hands trembled. "So I'm an employee?" He paused for a second too long. "You are my responsibility now." This was not a normal job. This was not help. This was control wrapped in polite words. She tried to stand, but he spoke again. "If you leave, the debts return. With interest. You know you can't survive that." He wasn't threatening her. He didn't raise his voice. That was what made it worse. He was simply stating the truth as he saw it. That night, she lay awake in a small room at the back of the house. The bed was clean. The door was not locked. Yet she felt trapped in a way she never had before. She thought about running, but where would she go? There was no phone signal, no money. No one who knew where she was. Morning came early on the ranch. Work started before the sun fully rose. He showed her what to do. Feeding animals, cleaning stalls, fixing fences. The work was hard, but she had known hard work all her life. What unsettled her was how closely he watched, how every movement felt measured. He rarely spoke. When he did, it was about rules, where she could go, when she could rest, what was expected of her. Never touched her. Never shouted. That almost made it more frightening. His control was quiet, steady, and complete. Days passed, then weeks. Her body grew stronger, but her spirit grew tired. At night, she stared at the ceiling, replaying every choice that led her there. She told herself this was temporary, that once the debt was paid, she would be free. But no numbers were written down, no timeline was given. Freedom felt like an idea meant to keep her obedient, not a real promise. Sometimes she caught him watching her from a distance, not with anger, not with desire, with ownership. That look made her feel smaller than words could explain. She began to understand that what she had agreed to was not just work. It was a surrender of control over her own life. She was fed, sheltered, and kept safe from the world, but at the cost of her independence, her voice, and her future. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the land in soft orange light, she stood by the fence and realized something that made her chest tighten. The ranch was not just remote, it was designed to erase people, to make them disappear quietly, without noise or witnesses. She had not been hired. She had been bought. And the worst part was knowing she had signed away her freedom herself, believing it was the only way to survive. That night she did not cry. Tears felt useless. Instead, she stared into the darkness and made a silent promise to herself. If this place was meant to break her, she would not make it easy. If her life had been reduced to a transaction, she would find a way to take her humanity back. One thought, one breath, one choice at a time. This was only the beginning. The days on the ranch began to blur together. Morning came before she was ready. Every single day. The sky was still dark when she stepped outside, the air cold and sharp against her skin. Work filled her hours, and silence filled the rest. The man spoke only when needed. His presence followed her everywhere, even when he wasn't nearby. It lived in the rules, in the routine, in the feeling that nothing here truly belonged to her, not even her thoughts. She tried to remind herself why she was there. The debts were gone, the letters, the threats, the fear of losing everything had stopped. By that logic, she should have felt relief. But relief never came. Instead, a different kind of fear settled in her chest, slow and heavy. Some nights, she sat on the edge of her bed and whispered to herself, just to hear a human voice. Other nights, she stayed silent, afraid even the walls might listen. The hardest part was not the work, it was the waiting. Waiting for clarity, waiting for answers, waiting for something to change. One evening, after a long day repairing a broken fence, her strength failed her. Her hands shook as she carried tools back to the shed. Dust clung to her clothes, and her body ached in places she didn't know could hurt. She felt small, worn down, and invisible. When she stepped into the house, she found him sitting at the table, reading papers. He looked up, eyes calm, face unreadable. Something inside her snapped. "Why am I really here?" she asked. The question surprised them both. Her voice was steady, but her heart raced. He did not answer right away. He set the papers down carefully, as if time itself had slowed. "You know why?" he said. "No," she replied. "I don't." "You say I'm working off a debt, but you never say how long. You never show numbers. I don't even know when this ends." He leaned back in his chair, studying her like a problem that needed solving. "Endings are earned," he said. That answer filled her with anger. "So I just stay here forever?" she asked. "Is that what you want?" He stood up, slow and controlled. "What I want is order. You agreed to that." Her hands curled into fists. "I agreed because I had no choice." For the first time, his calm cracked, just slightly. "You had a choice," he said. "You came here." The words hurt more than she expected, because part of her knew they were true. She had chosen this, but she had not understood the cost. Silence stretched between them. Her breathing grew uneven. All the fear, frustration, and loneliness she had been holding inside began to spill out. "If you own my work," she said quietly, "then tell me what that really means." The air felt thick, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Finally he spoke. "It means you live here. You work here. You follow my rules. I make sure you're fed, sheltered, and protected." "And my life?" she asked. "Does that belong to you too?" He did not answer. That silence was louder than any words. Something inside her broke. Weeks of fear turned into raw honesty. "Just something you paid for," she said, her voice trembling. "Then stop pretending this is anything else." The room felt smaller. Her words hung between them, dangerous and final. She expected anger. She expected punishment. What she did not expect was hesitation. He stepped back, as if her words had pushed him physically. His jaw tightened. "You don't understand what you're saying," he replied. "I understand enough," she said. "Enough to know I'm not free." For a long time, neither of them moved. Then he spoke again, slower this time. "You think control means harm," he said. "You're wrong." "Control without choice is harm," she answered. That night changed something between them. Not for the better, but for the truth. After that conversation, his behavior shifted. He became stricter, more distant. Rules were enforced harder, but something else changed too. He started to struggle. She noticed it in small ways. His eyes lingered longer than before, then quickly looked away. His steps slowed when he passed her in the hall. He spent more time outside, working alone late into the night. She realized that whatever arrangement he believed in, it was no longer as simple as a transaction. This gave her a strange sense of power and fear. She began to test boundaries carefully, asking questions, pausing before following instructions, watching his reactions. He never punished her. He never raised his voice. But tension filled the space between them like a storm waiting to break. One evening, exhausted and angry, she spoke without thinking. "If you're going to keep me here," she said, "then at least be honest about why." Slowly, he turned to face her. "Honesty changes things," he said. "Then maybe things need to change," she replied. That night, she barely slept. Her mind replayed every word. She feared she had gone too far. She feared she had not gone far enough. The next morning, he did something unexpected. He handed her a list. It showed numbers, payments, dates, a structure. "This is what you owe," he said. "This is how work counts." She stared at the paper, stunned. It wasn't freedom, but it was proof. Proof that the end existed. "Why now?" she asked. "Because you're not wrong," he said quietly. "And because I don't want this to become something worse." Those words stayed with her all day. She understood then that this ranch was not just a prison. It was a place where two broken lives were colliding. One seeking control to hide from his past, the other fighting to hold on to her future. That realization gave her strength. She was still trapped, still watched, still bound by a deal she never should have made. But now, she had something she hadn't had before. Clarity. And clarity, she knew, was the first step toward change. This was no longer just about survival. Time moved differently after the list appeared. The paper did not change her situation overnight, but it changed how she saw it. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, she could measure her days. Each task now had a value. Each hour meant something. The work was still hard, the rules still strict, but hope, even a small one, has a way of making heavy things feel lighter. She kept the paper folded inside her bag, checking it at night like a quiet ritual. The numbers slowly shifted as days passed. Not fast enough, but enough to remind her that the end was real, or at least possible. The rancher kept his distance. He still watched over the work, still gave instructions, but his presence felt different, less certain, less solid. Sometimes she caught him staring at the land for long periods, as if listening to something only he could hear. Other times, he looked tired in a way that sleep could not fix. She wondered about his past, who he had been before the ranch, before silence became his shield. Life settled into a strange rhythm. Mornings were filled with work, afternoons passed in quiet, evenings stretched long and empty. She learned the sounds of the place, the wind through the grass, the animals shifting in their pens, the house creaking as the temperature changed. Silence was no longer frightening. It was familiar. But something felt off. Small signs appeared at first. One evening she found a drawer locked that had never been locked before. Another day, she noticed boxes stacked in the storage room, filled with items that did not belong to ranch life. Clean clothes, shoes that had never touched dirt, a mirror wrapped carefully in cloth. She did not ask. She only watched. The rancher became restless. He paced more. He checked his phone often, even though the signal was weak. When it rang one night, the sound cut through the house like a sharp cry. She froze in her room, listening. His voice was low, tense. She could not hear the words, but she could hear the weight behind them. When the call ended, the house fell silent again. But the silence felt different. Heavy. Expectant. The next morning, he told her to clean the guest room. There had never been a guest room before. Her heart beat faster, but she said nothing. She worked slowly, carefully, making the bed, wiping dust from surfaces that had not been touched in years. The room felt unused, forgotten. as if it belonged to a life that had been locked away. That afternoon, he left the ranch for the first time since she arrived. He gave instructions before going. Clear. Short. Almost nervous. I would be so happy she spent the day alone. Being alone on the ranch felt strange. The land seemed wider. The house felt hollow. She walked through rooms she normally avoided, noticing details she had missed. A framed photo turned face down on a shelf, a coat hanging untouched behind a door. A life paused mid-breath. By evening, clouds gathered in the sky. Wind rose. The sound of a vehicle broke the quiet. She stood by the window and watched headlights approach. The truck stopped. Another car followed behind it. Her chest tightened. The rancher stepped out first. Then someone else did. A woman. She was well-dressed even after a long drive. Her posture was straight, her eyes sharp. She looked around the ranch with a mix of familiarity and distance, as if she knew the place but did not belong to it anymore. The woman stepped inside the house before the rancher could speak. She paused when she saw her. For a moment no one moved. "Who are you?" the woman asked. Her voice was calm, but there was something firm beneath it. Not anger, not fear. Control. She swallowed. "I work here." "Work?" she repeated. He did not meet her eyes. "She helps around the ranch." Silence filled the room. The woman looked at her again, this time more closely. She took in the dirt-stained clothes, the tired eyes, the way she stood slightly guarded, like someone who had learned to protect herself. "I see," the woman said. Dinner that night was quiet. Too quiet. The woman asked questions, not directly, but gently, skillfully. How long had she been there? What kind of work did she do? Where did she come from? She answered honestly but carefully. The rancher said very little. Later, when she returned to her room, her hands shook. She understood now. The secret was no longer hidden. He had a wife. Sleep did not come easily. Her thoughts spun in circles. She replayed every interaction, every rule, every look of ownership she had felt. Everything now looked different through this new truth. In the morning, the woman found her outside feeding the animals. "You don't look like hired help," the woman said quietly. She tensed, then straightened. "I do the work I'm given." "That's not what I meant," the woman replied. They stood side by side, watching the animals move slowly across the land. The wind carried dust and distant sounds. "Did he tell you about me?" the woman asked. "No," she said. The woman nodded as if that answered more than the words did. "He's good at silence," she said. "Always has been." There was no accusation in her tone. Only understanding. They talked more that day. Not about the deal, not about control, but about life. About choices people make when they're afraid. The woman did not raise her voice. She did not threaten. That made her presence more powerful than anger ever could. That evening, voices rose behind closed doors. She did not listen, but the tension pressed through the walls. The past had caught up with the rancher, and it was not going to leave quietly. She realized something important then. She was not the only one trapped by this place. The rancher was trapped too, by secrets, by guilt, by the need to control what he feared losing. And now, with his wife standing between truth and denial, the fragile balance of the ranch was breaking. Nothing would be the same again. The quiet deal that had defined her life was no longer private. And once truth enters a closed place, it never leaves without changing everything. The house no longer felt quiet after the woman arrived. Even when no one spoke, the air seemed filled with words waiting to be said. Every step echoed louder than before. Every door closing sounded final. The ranch, once controlled by routine and silence, had become a place of tension and truth. The woman moved through the house with calm confidence. She did not rush. She did not hesitate. It was clear she had lived here before, even if it had been a long time ago. She knew where things belonged. She noticed what had changed. Nothing escaped her attention. The rancher avoided her eyes. He spoke only when necessary, his voice careful, measured, as if each word could break something fragile. The strong certainty he once carried seemed thinner now, worn down by the weight of the past. She watched them from a distance, feeling like she was standing between two worlds. One was the life she had been forced into. The other was a history she had never known existed. Both were now crashing together, and she was caught in the middle. The woman did not question her directly at first. Instead, she observed. She watched how the rancher spoke to her, how he gave instructions, how she responded. The quiet power struggle was visible to anyone who knew how to look. One afternoon, while they were alone in the kitchen, the woman finally spoke. "You don't owe me anything," she said softly. The words surprised her. I don't understand, she replied. I mean answers, the woman said. Whatever you're carrying, it's not yours to protect. She hesitated. Fear still lived deep inside her. Fear of consequences. Fear of losing the small progress she had made. Fear of being blamed for something she never chose. I didn't know, she said carefully, about you. About any of this. The woman nodded. I know. There was no anger in her face, only disappointment. And something else. Sadness, perhaps, mixed with strength. Later that evening, the rancher tried to restore order. He spoke about schedules, about work, about keeping things simple, but simplicity was no longer possible. You can't pretend this is normal, the woman said. Not anymore. He raised his voice then, not in anger, but in frustration. I gave her shelter. I gave her work. I kept her safe. You gave her no choice, the woman replied. And you call that safety? The word struck the room like a heavy weight. She stood frozen, heart pounding. Hearing someone else say the truth out loud made it real in a way it had never been before. The rancher fell silent. That night she did not sleep. Memories replayed in her mind, the day she arrived, the list of rules, the feeling of being owned without chains. She had survived by staying quiet, by adapting, by telling herself this was temporary. But now, with the truth exposed, silence felt like a betrayal to herself. The next morning, the woman asked her to walk with her. They moved along the fence line, the land stretching wide and open around them. The sky felt bigger out there, the air easier to breathe. Do you want to leave? The woman asked gently. The question caught her off guard. She had imagined freedom so many times, but hearing it spoken aloud felt unreal. Yes, she answered honestly. But I don't know how. The woman stopped walking and turned to face her. There is always a way, she said. It may not be easy. It may cost something, but it exists. Those words lit a spark inside her. That afternoon, the woman confronted the rancher again. This time, there was no avoidance. No calm distance, only truth. This ends, she said. Not tomorrow. Not someday. Now. He tried to explain. To justify. To argue that he had helped, not harmed. But the woman did not accept half answers. You don't get to decide what help looks like, she said. Not when someone's freedom is involved. Older than before. The walls he had built to protect himself were cracking, and behind them was fear. He finally looked at her, the woman who had worked silently, endured quietly, and survived something she should never have faced. You can leave, he said. The words felt unreal. Too simple, too sudden. And the debt? She asked. He swallowed. It's gone. Relief, fear, disbelief, all tangled together. The woman watched closely. Say it clearly, she said to him. You owe nothing, he repeated. You're free to go. For a moment no one moved. Freedom, when it finally arrives, does not always feel like joy. Sometimes it feels like standing at the edge of something unknown, unsure whether to step forward. She nodded slowly. That night she packed her small bag. It held little more than clothes and the folded paper that once defined her days. She looked around the room one last time. The walls had seen her fear. They had witnessed her strength too. The woman stood by the door. You don't have to disappear, she said. You can choose what comes next. Tears filled her eyes, but she did not let them fall. Thank you, she said. The rancher did not come to see her off. As she walked away from the house, the land felt different. Still wide, still quiet, but no longer closing in on her. Behind her, the ranch faced its own reckoning. Trust broken. Truth exposed. A life built on control forced to confront its cost. Ahead of her lay uncertainty, but also possibility. She took one deep breath and kept walking, because for the first time since she arrived, every step she took belonged to her alone. The road away from the ranch felt longer than she expected. Each step took her farther from the place that had controlled her life, but it also pulled her into a future she had not planned. Freedom sounded beautiful in thought, yet it felt heavy in reality. She had no map, no clear destination, only the quiet promise she had made to herself, to never give up her voice again. The woman drove her to the nearest town. It was small but alive. People walked freely, talked loudly, argued, laughed. Ordinary life moved around her like a flowing river, and for a moment she stood still, unsure how to step into it. Before leaving, the woman handed her an envelope. Inside was enough money for a fresh start. Not charity, but support. You don't owe me, the woman said. Just live honestly. That's enough. No promises to stay in touch. No emotional speeches. just a shared understanding that some connections exist to change a life, not to last forever. She rented a small room above a shop. It was noisy, cramped, and imperfect, but it was hers. The door locked from the inside. The window opened to a street full of voices. At night, the sounds helped her sleep. They reminded her she was no longer alone in silence. Finding work was not easy. She had no strong references, no clear story she wanted to explain, so she started small, cleaning, helping wherever she could. Each job paid little, but each one gave her something far more important. Choice. Some days were harder than others. Certain smells reminded her of the ranch. Certain quiet moments made her chest tighten. Control does not disappear just because the place is gone. It leaves marks in the mind. But she faced those moments with patience, not shame. She began writing again, something she had stopped long ago. At first it was just short thoughts, scribbled late at night. Then longer pages followed. Writing helped her understand what had happened, not as a victim alone, but as someone who survived and learned. She did not tell her story to everyone. Not everyone deserved it. But she learned when to speak and when to stay quiet by choice, not fear. That difference mattered. Meanwhile, the ranch did not escape consequences. The woman returned later to close chapters that had been left open too long. The land was sold. The isolation ended. The rancher faced the truth of his actions, not through anger, but through loss. Control had cost him trust, respect, and the life he believed he was protecting. She heard these things from a distance. They no longer defined her. Knowing was enough. Months passed. Her routine settled into something steady. She made friends slowly. Trust came carefully, like a fragile plant that needed time to grow. But it grew. One evening, while walking home, she passed a mirror in a shop window and stopped. She barely recognized herself, not because she looked different, but because she stood differently. Shoulders straight, eyes steady, no longer shrinking. Freedom was not the moment she left the ranch. Freedom was every small choice she made afterward. It was choosing where to work, choosing when to rest, choosing to speak, choosing to walk away when something felt wrong, choosing herself again and again. She did not erase it. It became part of her story, not the ending. Pain taught her boundaries. Silence taught her the value of voice. Control taught her the power of choice. 1 year later, she moved to a new city. Not to run, but to grow. She enrolled in evening classes. She dreamed, carefully, realistically, but with hope. Her life was not perfect. It was real, and it was hers. Sometimes, late at night, she remembered the girl who boarded a bus with one bag and too much fear. She wished she could reach back through time and tell her something simple. You will survive this. You will not disappear. You will become stronger than the place that tried to define you. And in that quiet truth, she found peace. Not because justice was loud, but because healing was steady. Her story did not end with punishment or praise. It ended with something far more real.